Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a round review of round three of Aotearoa Super Rugby and round four of Rugby Gold out of Australia. So, I'm not Paul, but you know me. Paul's tied up, unfortunately, so I'm going to try and take the reins, but I'm old and I forget everything. So I've got someone here to help me tonight to remember what happened in the games, and that's one Stephen Harris. Good evening, Mr. Harris. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you, Ashwin. Yeah, privilege and pleasure to be on the show again, mate. And it's only been a minute, but you're doing a really good job, let me tell you.
It's been a good day, so let's carry it on. Well, let's get into it. So the first game was on Friday night, and that was the Force versus the Rebels out in Perth. Uh, did you get your eyes onto this game?
Yeah, I did actually, Ashwin. In fact, I actually messaged Paul and told him that I would be joining the show late on Sunday, around about 2 minutes past 8, because that's how long it would actually take to actually review that particular game, mate. What 7 scoreline, mate. Not a hell of a lot you could really say about it. I guess, but once again, it just proved in the first half. Yeah, the Western Force. I suppose their issue is really not being able to string anything together in a consistent way. I've got to say.
Yeah, look, I mean, Paul and I talked about it. I mean, I only saw the last 10 minutes of that game, roughly the last 10 minutes, and I sort of saying, what's the story with the Force? Because at the end of the day, they've actually got some pretty big names in that team. But I think what it boils down to is that they just time together to build those combinations. Just haven't had that time together.
Yeah, very much so. I think they're also. I think I've accused them of being Dad's Army in the past with a lot of former players, the odd former Wallaby there, former All Black, former Irish international, and Rob Kearney at the back. But yeah, they just whenever they just seem to string something together, there's always an error or a mistake, and you've got to say probably just not really enough of a killer blow. If you've actually got some possession and you get to half time, and listen, the only try that's come is through the visiting side. You've got to wonder. Not to
Yep.
mention, that was a home game for the Force as
Yep.
well. So those are the other opportunities you've got to jump upon as well. Having that home ground at your disposal and playing with enough passion to get across the line.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's interesting, and we go back to the drop passes, and one thing you associate with good experience is the fact that those little errors don't generally happen, aren't they? Sort of like because there's more composure around what's happening out there, or the calming influences, but that doesn't seem to be flowing into the game for the Force at all.
No, not at all. And you know, the sad thing about it, I don't know if the Rebels are that much better than them. And although, if you look at the Rebels in terms of their lineup, only the one try in the first half by their winger Anderson, they've got to be disappointed as well. You go through their particular lineup. You've got Cora Betty, you've got Hodge, you've got two more, Powell, who have all played for the Wallabies. So there's enough quality out wide as well. I just think it was kind of a game like you were watching, and like I say, it was a hard watch, where you were watching the older brother fighting the younger brother, just keeping him at arm's length. And that's what it kind of looked like
Yeah, I
to me.
mean, but the Rebel side has to now get concerned. I mean, like they dropped the opportunity to tip over the Brumbies the week before because they can't cross the line, and then this week again they just can't score tries.
Yeah, yeah. You make a good point. That's their first win of the season. They've actually, to be fair to them, they actually have had opportunities in a couple of the other games to get across the line. Although it's been pretty much shown that they're having issues scoring tries. If you look back to their games, I don't know if they've actually scored a lot of tries. I haven't got the stats here in front of me, Ashwin, so I'd probably have to go back and have a quick squiz on how a lot of their points have been scored over the last couple of weeks. As we look back to week 2 where they got beaten. The Rebels, where are you? 23-21. Well, all their points once again came via the boot.
Yep.
To a Reds team that was nowhere near their best, but did enough at the end. And then you look at, of course, week 3 where they played the Brumbies, and that was another game. They had opportunities in that particular game as well. But once again, you sort of look at the point scoring throughout that game, all penalties, and they've actually played in games where the oppositions have had yellow cards, and of course, in that Brumbies game, they had a red card. Aotearoa got a red card in that game, and that happened around about just before halftime. So
Yep.
they really they're just not being good enough to nail opportunities.
No, absolutely. Hey, look, I mean, we don't want to soak up a lot of time that we didn't really want to speak a lot of time on a game that we didn't want. But one thing that I think, we really should talk about is the fact is that with 3 minutes left on the clock and the chance to win the game or draw the game or win the game, you've got the options there. They decide to take a scrum. When are teams going to realise you don't take a scrum in the last 5 minutes of a game? Because one scrum will chew up the last 5 minutes of the game, right?
Not to mention it can be a lottery on the hit, as we know.
As actually transpired,
you get penalised.
Yep. If you really want to go for the win, the best option is the line out and speed it up, right? You have to speed it up. Too often, I mean, our favourite team, a few years ago now, and the fact is that one of the things, they were always in the game, a few minutes to go, catch a penalty, but they're wandering around discussing what to do, and it's just like the clock's just ticking down, and putting more pressure on you to win the game. And taking the scrum is just a poor option unless, we'll talk about this later. You're the Crusaders, and you know that you're going to be dominant. And even then, occasionally the Crusaders have been pinged as well, even though they've been the dominant scrum. They actually have a poor execution, and Aotearoa, the Crusaders version, has his legs extended out too far, slips out. Something goes wrong. Scrum 5 minutes out from the game. For most teams, if not all, poor option. Oh, we've lost you. You're on mute.
There we actually shouldn't forget there was also going into that last 10 minutes or so there was a red card as well. So once again another opportunity, just not taking advantage of those opportunities when they arise. I'm not too sure. Just on the red card, what did you think?
Remind me, as I said at the top of the show, I did see that red card, but I can't remember what happened. Remind me again.
Okay, that was for Highland Petty, and it basically looked like he was defending, and he just once again it was that shoulder to head contact, and it looked quite innocuous. But at the end of the day, under these current rules, and we'll talk a little bit more about TMOs later, it was probably the correct decision, but it was very innocuous.
Look,
at the time,
I think
really tall guy just didn't get his height in the right place, and unfortunately, that was the issue.
I think, and the commentary team alluded to it at the time, is just like, look, he's never gone low. He started off high. He was always high, and that was probably the issue in that situation. The thing with the red cards, yellow cards, refereeing decisions all this year, the problem is I think they're really making a rod for their back with fans because they're just being so inconsistent on how they're being dealt with, basically. But as I say, let's leave that for a bit later, otherwise we'll take up the whole show, even though we haven't got Boa here with us tonight.
yeah. Just to wrap up, they had their opportunities. They could have even actually taken a drop goal and basically and taken the soft option and maybe picked up a couple of points, but they decided to go for the win, and credit to them. But you've got to give the Rebels a whole lot of credit for their defence right on the line, and that was pretty much the end of it. I know they went over the line at one stage, but the referee couldn't see a grounding.
The problem is that you mentioned something, and then I sort of like click. Oh, hang on, we have to really mention this again. But poor thinking. This again, professional players, poor thinking. 3 points draws up the game, and you go to golden try extra time, and you're playing against 14
Yep.
men.
Yep. And yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Even right at the end, they kept driving close in when there was a little bit of space. There was a little bit of space out wide. So
wide.
talk about missed
Missed
opportunities.
opportunities.
The only real thing I can probably say that they've actually got going for them. If you look at the table at the moment, I was going to say at least they aren't sitting on the bottom. They have picked up that one win over the Waratahs, and they are sitting on 5 points. So they're not quite out of it in terms of semi-finals. But I guess when you're talking four teams going into a five, you're more than an 80% chance, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a bit later about the teams that will most likely make that final anyway. So let's move along into the next game that was played. We'll go in chronological order. Big word for Sunday night. Chronological order. And that means that we're talking about the Chiefs going down to see if they can break their duck against the Crusaders. Didn't happen. Really, to sum up the game, whilst at times the scoreboard might have been close, decisions went against the Chiefs. They never really looked like they were ever going to be. They were in that game and had the chance of winning it.
Yeah, listen. They started well. Damien McKenzie goes over really early, and once again, even a little bit of doubt about the way he placed that ball. If it had gone either way, I would have accepted that decision. That's how crazy that decision was, because for a moment there, it looked like he actually rolled it over the line, as opposed to place it. But hey, they give him the try. He basically converts the try, and then they come back a couple of minutes later, pick up a penalty, and it's 10-0 before you know it. But it's like most things, Ashwin, when you are playing a champion side, you've got to nail every opportunity that you get. And once again, they put enough pressure on inside the 22, where a pass went behind Etienne Nana-Satoro. All he had to do was kick it ahead.
Kick it ahead.
Try and reach down and picked it up. Now, there was nobody in the backfield. He scores close to the post. It's 17-0.
That's it. Yep. And then there's the missed penalty as well. 20-0.
Two of them.
Yep.
So there's 13 points. And like you say, I'm not sure it's going to win you the game, but boy, scoreboard pressure is an amazing thing, and it gives confidence.
Absolutely. I was just going to say it builds that confidence, and that's the thing is that, and you're playing against the Crusaders at home, their home. You're trying to break your 10-game losing streak or whatever it is. You need confidence. You need everything going your way. You can't have anything basically go against you. And really, they dropped a few opportunities. And I'll jump ahead to a moment. There was two moments this weekend where guys really, why did they try and pick up the ball? That was Saturo one was the one. What was one? And then Rico this afternoon. He doesn't need to pick that ball up. He just needs to hack that 5 meters out. Guys, think again. Professional players just sort of like that marginal decision, making that wrong choice.
Yeah, and then after all that pressure, and probably dominating the first 15 odd minutes, excuse me, the Crusaders get their first chance, and unfortunately, ENS or Etienne Nana-Saturo is defending in the first or second channel and completely misreads a David Havili break, goes out wide, and Leslie Faianuku scores in the corner, and it's another talking point as well. Obviously, one hell of a finish, because it's actually in tomorrow. It's going to be in tomorrow's Herald that he actually scored the try.
Good.
Look, he scored the try. Quite frankly, I thought he actually grazed the top of the grass, but probably at the end of the day, they'll all be buying the groundsman a couple of extra beers for cutting the grass.
Canterbury draft. Bit of Canterbury draft going on there, yep.
Absolutely. For cutting the grass so short. And that's what champion teams do, because let's face it,
cut the grass short.
Yeah, the Crusaders were sloppy.
They were.
First 15. They were really, really sloppy.
Oh, look, they were one of the things is that they were basically the Crusaders are just like any other sports team. If you can put them under pressure, they make mistakes, right? It's the fact is that, but you got to do it for 80 minutes. You can't do it for 20 minutes. You can't 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You can't do it for 70 minutes. You have to do it for 80 minutes.
Yeah, and in in between all these times, while all this was happening, of course, they were going to set piece scrums, and we knew that the Chiefs pack, once it came down, got to a little bit of a scrum fest, the Crusaders are a smart enough team to exploit that. You know, why should we move the ball where we know we can project the other team forward and just pick up a penalty?
Pick up a penalty, kick it downfield, get down further downfield. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And they just put that sort of what I call sort of possession pressure on you. They're so good at holding the ball when they get it right. They're just going to put pressure on you, especially with their speed of ball, which catches a lot of teams offside. So in between times, Richie Mo'unga kicks a couple of penalties, and right on half time, even a missed opportunity from Damien McKenzie, which could have basically just given the Chiefs something to think about during that time. I mean,
something to go into halftime with.
Oh, absolutely. It was such a muddled performance from the Chiefs that I'm actually trying to think who actually played well in that first half, if you know what I mean. I'm actually trying to think who played really well. That basically says to me that maybe nobody stood out. Okay, Tupou Vai stood out at time, and I actually thought Josh Lord for a newbie lock, and it's great that we've actually got a couple of newbie locks, and we'll get to that.
2 meter newbie locks.
Yeah, two really tall locks, and all of a sudden these young guys are putting their hand up, and I thought Josh Lord, I'm not sure if that was his first full start. I think he's come off the bench. Boy, I thought really, really good value in that first half. But, watching it on the box back home, there was that little voice in the back of your head thinking, man, their set pieces under pressure. And then you look at the bench.
Yeah, there's nothing left on the bench. And the biggest problem they got on the bench is a guy that can't hit the side of the broadside of a barn at a line out. 2 weeks in a row now, he comes on and the line out's just not going straight. It's not a case of not competitive. The ball's not straight. He's just getting called for not straight. They got a problem. Just look, coming back to the scrum though, what is making the Crusaders scrum so dominant? Is it because, like with the Chiefs, if we look at the Chiefs side of it not being dominant, the fact is that you've got two young guys that are basically spindly young locks that haven't got enough beef on them to provide the actual grunt in the second row. I mean, we were going back, Brad Thorne for the All Blacks he was never a ball winning line out lock, but they sure got him working in the scrum, didn't they? So is that the issue, is the fact that they don't have a grunt in the second row?
Yeah, there's that. And also, last year they had Nepo Lalala who would anchor that right-hand side. All of a sudden, if you recall, Tavao always used to come off the bench. He wasn't always a starter.
No.
He was the sort of guy you ran on in the second half because you knew he'd bring an impact in terms of the carry. But when it comes to the other side of his core role as a scrummager, I suppose Angus has always had a question mark over his scrummaging, and unfortunately in that area they got well and truly touched up. Of course, it wasn't the strongest starting front row for the Crusaders either. George Bauer coming in, and from all reports, he's a much improved prop. Made that All Black squad last year, and Alalatoa on the other side, we know is a strong pass. But you're throwing Cody Taylor, and that's very, very solid middle row that they've got.
You just got that grunt in the.
Yeah, Barrett and Whitelock attractors, and it just flows on. I think I might have said something in the rugby chat where, the crazy thing about it, when you're probably picking man of the matches for the Crusaders, you could arguably go for either Sione Havili, who's the no name in the pack, or even Fetty Douglas.
Fetty Douglas, yeah,
as the 11th hour replacement.
Yeah, I actually do think though Sam Whitelock. I mean, he's All Black. He's does he captain for the Crusaders? But he's just like, but look, he just does that work in the tight, and the scrum is a good example of that, which is just giving them so much grunt and so much forward momentum. And he's a wall. He's a mountain of a man. He's a caveman looking, Captain Caveman, and it's just outstanding. I think. I mean, but as I think also though, at the end of the day, when you look at when Paul and I were looking at talking about the game after reviewing the game. And I know we got in trouble because we're talking about the rest too much, Steve? but
Yeah,
but look,
we're getting to that.
you were getting it. But the fact is that it was really hard to pick a single individual from the Crusaders pack. They just all just there. They're all
Yeah,
doing the work.
that's what you want. I think we've often said if you get half of your team playing really well, there's a good chance you'll win a game of code. Well, I suppose we go to the half time and it's 11-10, and to the uninitiated who just walked in, you'd think, oh yeah, we've got a good contest in the second half. But I guess that all changed after 4 minutes, because the Chiefs were given a yellow card, which basically should never have got that far. And I just think that in terms of processes with the yellow card, it shouldn't have gone that far, because the pass from Drummond, which basically, in my opinion, it basically went forward. It didn't touch the hand, and they just didn't utilize the technology properly, because if they'd looked at the vision from behind, that clearly showed.
Yep.
That
it does.
It wasn't touched by the hand, and the pass actually went forward, and before you know, it was almost like a double. It was a double.
Oh, it's a double whammy.
For the Chiefs, because not only had they used the referee's challenge to look at it, which the officials actually got wrong. It should have gone back to a scrum. They had the double whammy of having
penalty try, yellow card penalty try
of Webber getting sent to the bin, and I have to say on that one, rightly so, and just when probably Chiefs supporters around the country were
screaming at the screen,
were pulling their hair out and throwing milk bottles and cowbells at their television sets. All of a sudden, there's a break down the right hand side and a clear forward pass that was projected out of the hands gets totally missed by the officials, and it really wasn't until they probably all saw 3 or 4 replays that they decided to actually review it.
You have a look.
I think that's what is infuriating people a lot more. You made a comment about how they're actually talking about how if it leaves from the hand backwards. I actually sent a link to Paul. I actually should have emailed it to yourself, and it actually explains the forward pass, where you can actually, and it showed it on grids, where the ball carrier throws the ball behind it because he's running at pace, but the ball actually, he's passed it backwards, but it's actually it gives the impression that it's drifting forward.
No, so basically there's two vectors. There's the energy that you're passing the ball backwards, and there's the inertia in the ball that's actually making the ball go forward. So getting technical here, you've got 2 vectors on the ball of energy. One's going backwards, and it's correct, and one's making it go forward. When you add those 2 together, it means from the point that the ball is passed, it will actually most likely end up ahead of that point. So, but if you want to go down that path, you have to start to get some way of getting consistent in that ruling, and then we can see in this afternoon's game where the ruling was inconsistent with what you've just explained, what's in the law book. So what they need to do is come up with an easier way to ascertain whether it is a forward pass, out of the hands, all that sort of stuff, or simply simplify it and say it just needs to go backwards. End of story.
There's actually a link that I actually sent on our rugby chat. I'm not sure if you're technically savvy to have a look at it, Ashwin, and maybe even show, but it's through Total Rugby, so we actually should be.
Oh, where'd you send it?
I actually sent it to onto the rugby chat link.
Oh, okay.
Our rugby talk link, if you can pop it up, but it's really interesting. I know there'd be some interesting thoughts to the people who actually tune into the show, so I'd be actually curious to know what you actually thought about it. Where I actually thought that one. Sometimes if you see something in real time on TV and it looks forward, it probably is forward. But if for some calls where it's clearly come from the backhand but it's drifted, it does give the perception that the person was running behind the player. But I always look to see where the receiver is. Ashwin was in terms of where the player was. In the case of the Crusaders pass, the receiving player was in front of the kick. He was almost throwing his hands out forward to catch the
Catch the
it. If
ball.
we get, and we'll get to obviously the Akira
Re-
Rico
the
Ioane.
Ioane brothers.
Rico is so far behind the
Back.
play,
Yep.
so far back from the play, and despite the ball drifting forward, to me it wasn't a forward pass. It should have been the best try of the weekends. But I do digress. Our officials do have issues.
Yeah, look, hey, just on that, and I suppose jumping forward here, the harshest, the guy that sort of like the harshest sort of like end out of all this is poor old Dalton Papali'i, who actually does that magnificent turnover. Because if he doesn't turn that ball over, Highlanders score the try, right? Because the defense was gone, was shot.
But we shouldn't jump the gun though, Ashwin. Even though you're
no.
Blues jersey and Blues cap,
I'm bad for that. I'm bad for that. Bad host.
We are still
coming back to the Chiefs and Crusaders. Look, Jordan's talking about the fact, and I think it's pretty clear as well. The Chiefs actually lack size right round, whether it's in the second row like we've alluded to, or where we look at their back row as well. I alluded to this in our review of the game as well. Sam Cane, phenomenal stats on defence and the number of tackles he makes, but the reality is that I think he needs to actually provide more in attack as well. You can't just live off one side of the game.
Yeah. I totally get that. And unfortunately, when your forwards are getting touched up, hey, not a lot you can do. But hey, we can actually discuss really good passes. And of course, the next Crusaders try was the Will Jordan try off the short pass. We've been speaking before about players who were probably up for maybe a man of the match performance. Well, one stood out in the backs, and that was Richie Mo'unga, because he had probably he must have had flies or ants on him or spiders, because nobody wanted to tackle him.
There was the thing, like Richie had a fantastic game, but when you haven't got a defensive line that's coming up in your face, you've got all the time in the world to run it, haven't you?
Yeah, even had a couple of times leading up to that try, had a couple of times to dance and threw a brilliant little inside ball to Will Jordan, which Herman wasn't forward. That one was actually spot. that one was actually spot on the money, mate. So that was a good try. But to be honest, a lot of the damage was pretty much done while Weber was in the bin, and the whole momentum had gone to the Crusaders, and they showed
they got ruthless.
They showed what a champion team they are, but they certainly don't need an uplift from the officials. Really and truthfully.
Hey, but let's look, as you say, let's talk about their passing in that last 20, I think it was. Maybe it might have been 30, but definitely the last 20. The offload game was just across the park, was with every player in a red jersey. And one thing that I felt was happening was the fact is that they were actually not overcommitting themselves on attack in the tackle. They would actually, before they became compromised, they would offload. So they would put themselves in a position where they weren't looking for the extra meter effectively or to get dominant in the tackle. They were basically going, I'm going to be tackled, but I'm going to make sure I'm in a position I can pass the ball.
The two things that mainly happen if you're trying to get extra meters, it means that you're battling. It means that you're battling also to get to ground. But it also means if your cleaners are not getting there quick enough, you compromise that situation. So what the Crusaders do very well, they don't give you that opportunity. They'll offload. And all of a sudden, you've got to get people into places that they thought they were going to. You probably got the next guy going to the break. I've got to get to that breakdown. Then they've got to shoot off somewhere else there. And then from then on, it's the Richie Mo'unga show.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I suppose other than that, that sort of sums it up. Look, the scoreline through that game, obviously, with the officials helping, it was never in doubt, though, at the end of the day, was it?
No, pretty much. I think I made a comment in our chat room. You could have given the Chiefs a 20-point head start, but you'd still back this champion team to pull it back.
I know that you're sort of like the maestro, sort of like when the Crusaders are down at halftime, always putting a cheeky little wager on them to be ahead at this end. And I sort of thought, oh, Steve's going to get a chance to do that again tonight.
Yeah,
Looked like it in the first half there for a while.
Oh, listen, if they were 17, 20 nil down, I would have been on my TAB account,
Yep.
checking out what they're paying. Listen, at the end of the day, the game pretty much from the time that Will Jordan scored that try and Moanga converted it to push it out to 25-10, it was good as done. And then Douglas
That was done.
put a seal on it with a close range, and then another couple of obviously another try right at the end to Dunshay just to absolutely ice the win.
Yep.
And credit to the Chiefs. Yeah, they showed a little bit of ticker to get a try to ENS right at the end. But at the end of the day, 39-17, which
17.
is an interesting scoreline, which we'll get to shortly.
We'll get to it shortly. But then we fly across the Tasman again because we're not don't have to go into quarantine. So we go with the Reds playing the Brumbies in Canberra, and it looked like all one-way traffic there, and the Reds were basically in for a tough night. But things turned around. But look, let's start with the Brumbies first. Started off fantastically, really dominant in that first probably 20 odd minutes.
Yeah. All just really all over the Reds who really just couldn't get anything going at the get anything going at the time, and they were just starting to listen. They love a red zone, don't they? This team, if you give them half an opportunity,
they convert in the red zone.
The ball down into the red zone with a line-out drive. They're gonna try. They're gonna score a try every day of the week, and sort of right in the think of it was our mate Whainga, who's come back from a bit of a long-term injury as well. He comes on as a replacement and picks up a couple of plums in the second half, So
absolutely,
just shake your head.
Look, I remember watching a game. So we go back a few years. Blues went over to Canberra and basically kept defending, and kicked into the corner, driving more try. They went back the next year, or obviously might have been 2 years later, and they made sure they didn't give any penalties away. And that's what you have to do with the Brumbies, is make sure you don't give penalties away so they can't get into that red zone. Because if they get into the red zone, as you've alluded to, dollars to donuts, they're going to score tries.
The other thing they do really well, they don't play a lot of rugby in their half. Banks feels the ball 9 or 10 times out of 10. He goes for the high kick option with a really good chase, and they have a really good chase where they'll basically put a lot of pressure on you, and that's the battle they were winning. They were getting a lot of the 50-50 sticks. Credit to the Reds. The Reds were basically doing their best to stay in the fight, and I thought it was a 24-16 at halftime. They scored a very good try to I think Vunivalu scored a try in the 31st minute, because up until then all we'd seen is 3 penalties from James O'Connor. Vunivalu, who was rocks and diamonds on the
totally.
1 minute he's dropping off inside his own 22. The next minute he's finishing off a try, but that was probably off the back of some really good work down the blind side by the Reds. So he just finished it, and of course
I think
Connor kicks another penalty right on half time, and that was in reply to Samu, who went over for his second try. What was that? That was scored 5 minutes out from halftime. I'm going to just quickly say with regards to Pete Samu, boy, he looks a lot bigger these days.
He does. He does.
Looks like he's bulked up, but we've always known he was a good player. But good thing about it, looks like he's just taken his game to another level.
I thought, because we saw him at the Crusaders when he was there, and he was a phenomenal player, and I thought he just went off the ball when he sort of went over to play, try and chase that Wallabies jersey and the like. Went off the boil a bit, but he's definitely back, and I think he's playing at that same level that he was with the Crusaders now as well. Maybe that's a bit harsh, I don't know. I think you're being a bit generous to Vunivalu. I think he was just rocks. But fair crack to him. I mean, at the end of the day, geez, how many games of rugby union has he played?
Yeah. I think
it takes a while.
Second,
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
first or second start. Or actually, might have been his first start. I think he might have had one off the bench or something like that. So he
But,
hasn't played a lot.
but we did see an example of his pace when I think it was the Brumbies put a move broke down and a ball got kicked towards the goal line, and he actually had to run back. Although he probably just showed a little bit of game awareness where the ball would have gone on the line if he'd waited. It just would have been a goal line
Yep.
dropout. But he
Instead of a
actually took it
5 minute
back
scrum
over, so it was a 5 meter scrum. But I was incredibly impressed with the pace that he actually showed
to get
to
back.
get back there. So it might be one of those things where it takes him a while to figure it out. Listen, I also thought in the first half, we know that the Reds have got a very good loose trio themselves with Harry Wilson, Scott Young, of course Liam. I think Liam Wright is still injured at the moment, a couple of weeks away. Good loose forward trio, but they were totally outplayed in that first sort of 40, 50 odd minutes by Kuzak, Samu, and Valentini, who's one heck of a ball carrier as well. That crop of hair he's got probably makes him look a bit taller than what he really is.
Yes. Look, actually, just I was going to say before, I felt like the Reds were actually their own worst enemy in the first half. They had opportunities. They seemed to be making progress. Then they'll make a silly little error that would basically, turn the ball over. So it's like they probably could have been in the game a lot earlier instead of just, taking it in the 78th minute, so to speak. But
Yeah.
yeah, they if they can remove errors from their game, they're going to be a lot more dangerous than they are.
Oh, mate, I agree. Listen, I think the Reds are one of those sides. They are an exciting team to watch. I mean, to say Delgunu, who's normally good value, you know, is so good with ball in hand, and when he has got the ball in his hands with space, as even at international level we've seen, he can be a very good player, and he's probably still finding his way in the game. But listen, for a lot of us, and I've got to put my hand up and basically say, hey, when it got to 31-16, I was thinking,
It's
oh,
game over.
I'd game over, and I will freely admit and put
Yep.
my hand up that I actually went to bed. I thought it was done and dusted. So imagine my pleasant surprise when it turned out to be a great finish. And if you
I
were
hung
a
on in there. I was thinking along the same lines as you, and I hung on in there because I was sort of thinking, look, if the Reds can actually finish some of the stuff that they start, there's a chance. And the way that Tupou was starting to do his sort of bulldozer impersonation, it's like I just felt like the Reds was still there because the Brumbies, if they stop getting penalties, they really don't. It doesn't feel like there's a lot to their game if they stop getting penalties.
yeah. I agree. I agree. They kind of look like a little bit like you talk about a few people who've said the Blues are a South African team. I actually think the Brumbies are more of a South African team than what
Yep,
the Blues. They rely so much
their
on their
game plan.
set piece game plan, playing in the opposition territory.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's I'd agree with you there. Absolutely. Hey, speaking, I mean, like, what are your thoughts on Jordan Pataya? I just don't think he's gelling at the moment. There's something with his game that really, all that potential isn't really coming out. 'Cause we know he's a phenomenal player.
I think he's one of those players you've got to. So much of their play actually revolves around James O'Connor. And listen, I can understand why they were taking the shots at goal. They were basically wanting to stay in contact at the time. And listen, I totally get that. But boy, they've got to somehow get this guy into the game a heck of a lot more.
More. Yep, yep,
Yeah,
absolutely agree. You got that talent. You know what he's capable of, but you're just not seeing it.
yeah. You know, and because you've got Paisami there, I wonder if Paisami maybe trying to do a little too much as well. Good, not a bad footballer, but there were two or three times Paisami went straight into contact and actually ignored Patira a couple of times. So it's
Yep.
really those little things about getting their game plan right. He's a talent, no question. Even at the back there, and what makes it even more stranger, you look at their back three. Vunivalu, Dunguni,
Good.
Campbell. That's
Yep.
not bad.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
That's
No,
not
you got
bad.
to. Yeah.
You've got to be utilizing their talent. If you're not utilizing their talent, it's crazy.
And
But hey, on saying that, it was pretty much the forwards that got them back into the
got them
game. They
home.
rolled their sleeves up, and on what 61st minute, 19 minutes to go, after a couple of cracks at the line, we've got Taniela Tupou showing his strength, and that gives them a try. The conversion goes over, and before you know it, it's what 31-21.
Yep. Yep. And
Crazy.
it's like game on. Game on.
Game on
And,
again.
and then
Uh,
we've just talked about Pataya, and maybe needs to sort of like get more opportunities, and and he's the one that goes and pulls off that. He runs around the wrong side, gets blindsided by the post, so he can't see where the ball is, but manages to get his hands around the corner, hands on the ball to score the match winner.
yeah, and
Have you
I'll tell
actually
you what.
seen that one?
Yes, listen. Straight after that, we shouldn't forget one area where we should give the Reds a bit of credit as well. Their scrum started to dominate
Yep.
as well, and of course their next try that basically came from Wilson just came from a dominant scrum
Yep.
at the end of the day, and then the whole momentum started changing, and that brought it back to 31-30, and we thought, oh, here we go again, and then the Brumbies get an opportunity, and I think it was Whitey who went over in the
Yep.
corner. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, it was the replacement winger that went over in the corner, and that was a good try, and you just thought, okay, maybe it's
It's not
done
the
and
Reds'
dusted,
night
done and dusted then,
again.
crazy. And really and truthfully, what did that happen? That happened with about 8 minutes to go. So
Yep.
you would have thought the game was all over. So if you hung in there, you were rewarded for hanging in for that whole 80 minutes.
Keep the faith.
keep the faith. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Mind you, to be fair, it's with Rugby AU, it is hard to keep the faith with some of those games that you end up watching, and it's
Yeah.
like,
oh, listen, great little dab through at the end as well, and of course the bounce of the old rugby ball. If you're going to score them to get the winning try, you need the conversion. The best place to score them is right beside
right in front.
the sticks anyway. But I also sort of want to mention, once again, it pays to keep your head and keep the scoreboard flowing as well, because they were at that stage, 38-30, they took a penalty goal in between times as well, just to keep them in the fight. Yeah.
Oh, look, I mean, no, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that with the penalty goals, I think it's starting to become if it's straight out in front, take the points, and just don't let the opposition get away with the infringing, because that's what you're doing by kicking for the corners or taking your scrums or whatever. Take the points on offer, get back up there. You've got that momentum. Use that momentum to go back again.
Yeah, and that penalty goal came 4 minutes. 4 minutes from time. Some teams would have kicked to the corner, but if there's a game still there to be won, why not go ahead and do it? But I suppose,
Yep.
Ashwin, it makes interesting reading for the Super Rugby Australia table now.
Yep.
The Brumbies. The Brumbies, they've got a game in hand, haven't they? I think they have. They've got a game in hand, so they're with 15 points. The Reds on 13, back to the Rebels on 6. The Western Force on 5, and of course the Waratahs.
The Waratahs.
Just the one point.
Hey, look, just on a just in terms of like with what Jordan's saying there, in terms of credit to Brad Thorne, you go back a couple of years when Brad Thorne first started his coaching career at the Reds, and everybody was ready to basically shift him on, right? I mean, he was having such and it was harsh because they had some horrible injury runs as well. The experienced players were getting injured and all that sort of stuff going on as well. So the fact that they've gone through the hard times and stuck with Brad Thorne, now it's sort of bearing some fruit.
Yeah, not to mention the pay dispute last year out of COVID, when Isaac Rodder decided that no, my contract's not worth that. I'll go to France. Now he's making noises that he wants to come back. And credit to Big Brad. Brad has basically turned around and said, I don't know if we want you. Maybe.
Yep.
Maybe Isaac could go to the Waratahs.
Harsh but fair. Harsh but fair. Well, that brings us, I suppose, to the last game of the weekend. And what do we say? Did you first of all ask? Were you watching on TV or at the ground?
No, I had something on this afternoon, but I made sure to get in front of a television screen at 3:30 because I was a little bit. You always slightly nervous about the Highlanders because you never know
Oh, absolutely.
what they're gonna bring to the table. Last week was the bye week for the Blues. The Highlanders would have been coming off a bit of a high after knocking the
Chiefs
knocking the
over.
Chief, knocking the Chiefs over. So, in all honesty, I expected it was going to be tough, but I guess at the end of the day, it was probably anything but.
But yeah, I
We
think it's
saw,
like it's
yeah.
like the Crusaders game, really. I mean, the scoreline doesn't. I mean, it never actually felt like the Blues were in danger of losing that game.
No, I tend to agree with. Even though I was trying to be upbeat on the chat line for the Highlanders, or at least to try and get Cornflake involved.
Yeah,
Somewhere
didn't
along the
no
line, but
comments from Cornflake
no,
this weekend.
he's
Yeah.
gone absolutely missing in action. I hope he's still alive. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm pretty sure he is. But yeah, I probably expected a little bit more from the Highlanders, and I made a comment, and it might be a little bit of a flippant comment, but I basically said a week is a long time in rugby. Jonah
Yeah,
Nui,
yeah.
he was amazing last week. Listen, I do, and in all honesty, I hope the injury that he received is not too bad. But
What was
I
the
suppose
injury?
I'm not 100% sure at
Oh,
this
okay.
stage, Ashwin. I'm pretty sure Paul will update us on the Tuesday night, the driving maul. Don't forget to tune into that 8 p.m.
Good plug.
on Tuesday when maybe one of our ugly mugs will be on your screen once again. Yeah, listen, Blue supporters over the years, you'd have to go a long way back to think of a more against the New Zealand side before a more dominant
Dominant.
forward
Yep.
forward effort, and it was a dominant effort. You even saw in the first half. I know you were there at the ground, and you must have been thinking, "God, I'm at the right end of the ground to be watching this game." I know you normally sit up in the west end.
West End, yes, absolutely. Well, just
And
on that point, like I mean, there was some. I mean, I some dubious refereeing decisions made in the game, and it sort of started early on when Ruru knocked the ball out of Aaron Smith's hands right on the goal line. The Blues take two players wrestling for the ball on the ground. And out of everything, the Blues got penalised. And I was thinking, how the hell did the Blues get penalised when a Highlanders player has actually, I mean, you've got Smith and Ruru on the ground fighting for the ball. They're both off their feet. And you've got a Highlanders player comes and joins from the Blues side of the ruck to help secure the ball. And the Blues got penalised.
yeah, first of all,
I mean, I'm at the ground, so you'd sometimes you have to come home and you need to see the replay to sort of say, hey, look, actually, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, the official was correct at the end of the day, and the reason why is because Ruru made no attempt to move. In fact, if you see the replay, he almost snugs himself even in further, as opposed to pulling.
But our view of that was, yes, I saw that way as well. But what we felt was the fact that he'd won the ball.
Yeah, I actually, to be honest, I actually thought it was knocked on by Aaron Smith, but it when you looked at it again in the replay, yeah, maybe it did go back at the end of the day. But on saying that, it was the first signs because all that pressure came from looks like a knee injury from Utamahui, who's just put that up. So thanks for that.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the first signs that there was real scrum pressure on the Highlanders. And when I saw that, I thought it was going to be a tough day at the office for them.
Yeah, it was absolutely. I suppose again, the platform was laid by the Blues, and although it's an interesting right from the kickoff, Patrick Tuipulotu goes and puts in an absolute massive hit on one of the Highlanders players, and it set the tone. But interesting enough, there was no same movement because it didn't break down. The Highlanders actually went about 80 meters downfield by maintaining the ball. So they actually had a pretty good start
Oh,
to the game, just weren't able to convert that and sort of get some momentum, confidence happening.
and I actually thought at times their ball movement in terms of width was
Mm.
probably a bit quicker than what the Blues were offering up at times. It just basically seemed that they were able to get the ball wide,
Yep,
out
into gap,
out to
into
out
space.
into space, into
Yep.
flanks just a little bit quicker, and that's why I thought, well, gee, is this the way they're going to play all afternoon? The Blues are going to have to be right on their game, and there were times where they almost opened the speed of the ball. They almost opened the Blues up on fringes, but they'd eventually make a mistake. And then once again, the Blues are now smart enough to realise, yeah, we have got a strong tight five and a tight eight. We'll just pull a penalty. I mean to say they obviously may have got a bit racked up by Clark Dermody's comments before the game saying that they were more like a South African team. Well, they put in a kind of like South African performance mixed in with a bit of grind and a bit of flair, I've got to say.
Oh, there was plenty of flair out there on the show from the team, and let's come back to that one of the moments of the game, which turned out to be scrunched up and thrown in the bin by the officials. So the Highlanders are absolutely hot on attack, and reality is that if they basically recycle the ball from one more ruck, they would have most likely gone in to score. But Dalton Papali'i turns the ball over. They feed Akira Ioane down the wing, and it's just like he's playing sevens running down that sidelines, isn't he?
Oh,
Because he's burning off backs.
absolutely. There were two Ioanes running down that wing, but there was the
Well,
third
actually,
guy.
oh, wait,
It was
I'll time out, time out, time out. There were three Ioanes running out there.
well, there were two running down that right flank on the within that 5 meter
Channel.
tram line, and yeah, well, one pretty much got trampled.
Yeah.
Put it that way, and of course we get to the pass, and of course we're all still trying to figure out how that was called forward, because once again, listen, the ball may have travelled forward in theory, as you said, but he
Yep.
actually threw it back. And
Back, oh, look. Yep.
to me, his brother was behind the player, so
Oh,
it
look.
may have drifted forward. But was the wind blowing towards you?
Oh, but there was a breeze that was very slight. Obviously, it was very, very slight because America's
Not
Cup racing got
not
called
enough to
off.
get not enough to get yachts on their foils. So
Not
there you
on their
go.
foils. so, so yeah, not enough wind. So the wind was absolutely negligible in terms of any effect on that game at all at any stage. Look, at the end of the day, if you look at his whole passing motion, whether it's the hands or the turning of his upper body, everything is in a backwards motion. So if they're going with this whole it's backwards out of the hand, therefore the pass is okay, there is absolutely no way that they could have ruled that try out, which they did.
So if I'm basically throwing a pass and I've got the wind with me and it blows forward, it's a forward pass. That's pretty much what they're saying.
That's what they're saying, effectively, isn't it? From today's call, and that's what although we like having shots at Boa now, but I mean we're on the same. We're all in agreement. At the end of the day, what the issue we've got is the inconsistencies in the rulings that we're seeing. That's the problem. Is the fact is that if we go back, obviously, if they're talking about backwards out of the hands in other scenarios where they're looking at TMO's looking at passing, and they say it's backwards out of the hand, that's all that matters. And when you look at it today's one, and it's clearly backwards out of the hand, and then they go call it a forward pass. This is the problem that they've got, is that they're not consistent in their analysis of the pitches to make a call. So they end up making not right. It's not the fact that it's worse than making wrong calls. They're just inconsistent because one week it's forward pass and the next week it's not.
Yeah, listen, I think it's interesting. I think that also preluded to one of the, in my opinion, the biggest moment of the actual game, because it was a fantastic turnover from Dalton Papali'i, because the Highlanders had momentum, and unfortunately for them, it probably put their best attacking weapon out of the game. But if you think about it, if the Highlanders had scored, got some momentum there,
Yep.
that would have been massive in terms of keeping them in touch leading into half time. But it was almost like a what they call a 14-point try. In fact, it should have been a
Should have been a
14-point
14-point try.
try
Look,
turnaround.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's an interesting one because you go. The score was 17-3, very close to half time, and it's the Highlanders scored a converted try, 17-10. There's nothing in it.
Mm.
Although, if you'd watched the game, you would have said they're close, but they're not in this game.
Yeah, I know in the chat room I said, oh man, don't discount these guys. They've actually shown in the past they can come back, but there was.
Well, look,
there was
I didn't disagree.
There was inevitability about it, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was. Like the Chiefs Crusaders game, there was an inevitability about it. But look, I didn't disagree with your comment in terms of, look, 2 to 3 tries, because it's a bounce of a rugby ball. It's an intercept here. It's a dodgy pass there, and all of a sudden, even though you're the dominant side, and we've seen this how many times, teams with 60, 70% possession even, and they end up on the wrong side of the scoreboard.
Yeah.
So it can happen.
Ash Dixon gets a try from a line-out drive. There is still, and that was on the. I'm just looking to where that was. That was on the 54th minute. So there's still 20, 22, 23 odd minutes to go. Now credit to the Blues. On the 59th minute, they get a penalty. They could have actually kicked to the corner, but they actually took the 3 points, and that was primarily
respect,
just to break the momentum.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
And of course, the next Akira Ioane try pretty much sealed the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And then it just that sort of nicely. So one thing we have noticed since Akira's worn the black jersey, he has actually seems to have taken his game to another level.
Oh, much
or
more
the level that we expected.
Yeah, I couldn't. I think he has. He's almost taken it to a level. He's showing more of his game, because I think he was always just a real look. He almost demonstrated flat track bully, pick up from the back, try and take on as many people as I can. I'm seeing a little bit more to his game at the moment. A little bit more passing, a little bit more out in the open, a little bit more willingness to actually set the ball up for the next phase, as opposed to going one step too far. Boy, and what I do really like is his defence. How he, he'll go in high, he'll hold people up, and he'll slow that ball down. Even though the referee's saying it's a tackle, let it down. In those few seconds, he's basically done enough to slow the ball down.
Microseconds. That's what it's about. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I like about him is the fact is that you go back a couple of years, he used to do this crazy thing where you'd pass the ball to him and he'd wait for the defense to come to him and try and shrug him off. And it was just like, what are you doing? You're going backwards by doing that. There was a horrible part to his game where he used to do this consistently, and that's gone now. He takes the ball and he just goes hard at the line.
Yeah, and there's real presence about him, just ranging that little bit wider. Listen, it'd be remiss of us not to talk about a couple of yellow cards as well. I suppose Josh Dixon, at the end of the day, probably more clumsy than anything else. But you can't take people in the air, so you probably get no argument with me. But where you will get an argument with me is the yellow card to Sam Knock. Now he was
what the hell was that?
He was binned for not supporting his own weight, but when you actually saw it, he was on the ball. He's a short guy.
Yeah,
he stapled himself over the carrier, and no way in the world was he not supporting his own weight.
Body. He was straight onto the ball, because he was the first player there. There was nobody to set the ruck or anything. He didn't actually need to go past the ball because he could go straight onto the ball.
Yeah,
and then, ironically, the Highlanders player comes in from the side to clean him out.
Yeah, and
it's just like there was a crazy call.
And even more ironic, Fakatava basically has a prop defending on the blind side, so he runs a try in. So it definitely punished the Blues. Fortunately, the Blues had the game well and truly under control, but once again comes back to this consistency piece with the officials.
Yep, absolutely. That's the thing, and it's just like, actually, let's. That's a good one, because that's very, much like Brad Weber's yellow card, right? In terms of, not yellow card, sorry, his penalty when he's called for being, he picks the ball comes out of the scrum and inside their own 22, he picks it up and he's penalised. He was never offside in that play, never. And the irony, as I said on the review show, is the fact is that you go back to the Crusaders Highlanders game when Bryn Hall is in front of Aaron Smith, the ball's still in the second row, and nothing happened. In this situation, Brad Weber doesn't get ahead of the ball squirts out, and there's some protection for the red and blacks from the referee.
Yeah, the weekend review on the referees will be interesting, but I suppose we shouldn't before we go. That really a crazy stat that's just been alerted to me. Obviously, we had exactly the same scores of 39-17, but something even more ironic for those train spotters that are out there in round was it round two of round 2 of Super Rugby, the Blues beat the Hurricanes by 31 points to 16, and in the third round, the Crusaders beat the Hurricanes by 33 points to 16. So that's a little spooky as well. Not quite the same scores, but it just may give you an idea that these two teams, the Blues and Crusaders, who meet next Sunday, and I know
next Sunday,
there, Ashwin, could be a very, very exciting contest. Because it'd be fair to say, in these two Blues wins, I don't think they've been anywhere near their best.
No, not at all. Not at all.
If I'm totally honest, and I also think we should also acknowledge, we've acknowledged the Kiriuani and the hard work that's been done up front. But listen, like the Chiefs, we should acknowledge a man who made his debut today, young Sam Derry, who was basically signed by the Blues on potential. And I've got to say, a missed time getting his head in the wrong place on a line-out job. Boy, I think his game was nigh on perfect for the other part, and he played a full 80 minutes.
It's almost like that's what you expect out of a player out of Crusader country, isn't it? This is the top 2 inches is well, and they just do the right things and don't make mistakes. So you're really looking forward to the development that we see in that. The only thing I'd have to say is that he needs to get out there and have a few more steaks.
Yeah, that'll come. But
he's only 20. He's a young fella. Yep.
2021, but very, very encouraging start for Sam Derry. I suppose some of the other locks in the squad, Josh Goodhue, and who's out with a wrist injury at the moment, will be a little bit nervous about trying to get back into the match day 23. But gee, that's pretty handy. The Blues have shown how much depth they've got in the front row, and they're starting to build depth right across their squad.
Roster Park. Now, well, here's the interesting good one that you lead into there, because I think Dalton got a bit of a head clash, friendly fire from Harry Plummer, and you could see he was really hesitant to go. I mean, they're always hesitant to go off the field, right? But he was really hesitant to go off the field, and you can see why. Who's coming on to replace him? Tom Robinson. You don't want to give anybody a shot at showing how good they are, because they could end up taking your spot, and that's where you really want to be. When you're at that stage, you've got a good, strong squad.
Yeah, and when you've got the big red coming on, you're going to get work rate and some. I mean, as he stands out with his red here as well. And boy, what 2 or 3 seasons makes when the biggest talking point about the Blues were their halves. And you've got to say, these halves at the moment are really, really comfortable in their skin at the moment. Aotearoa Black looks on top of his game. And listen, you'd have no troubles with any of the halfbacks that they've got in the squad. And that includes Finlay Christie, who I saw play yesterday for the Blues under-20s against a Northern emerging team. And he looked really, really good, looked really sharp. Also, Tane Plumtree as well. Gee, what a good forward this kid is as well. And a couple of other Blues players running around yesterday. So there is just so much depth in the squad. I mean to say they lost Talia, and Narawa came on early, did the job. So yeah, it's good times ahead for if you're a Blues supporter.
Well, look, I mean, the thing is that I suppose being a Blues supporter, one of the things is that after years and years of disappointment, we just don't get ahead of ourselves at the end of the day because we've been disappointed so often. So we just, we're going to use the cliches that the teams use, right? You take one game at a time. You know, the big one's up next week, and really, it's the development that's been to date is great, but you want to measure yourself against the best, and you want to, you want to get the win against the
Yeah.
best. And next week is the big test for them.
It will be next level. Listen, I advise you, haven't got a ticket, you better get a ticket, because I know 15,000 didn't seem like a big crowd at the game today, but a lot happening in Auckland at the moment. I mean, it's like the yachting would have dragged a few, and I think a lot of people would have just wanted to have their television set in front of them where they could, just skip across either Super Rugby or the yachting. So I look forward to next week. Of course, the other game next week, we've got the Chiefs playing the Hurricanes next week. So
the Highlanders with the bye.
The Highlanders with the bye. So
one thing we do have to remember, and I don't want to scare everybody out there. I'm in enough mental stress as it is myself. Is that every time the Blues go to play the Crusaders, we end up in lockdown. so fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. There's nothing there. Everybody use your masks.
We probably should sign it off there. So it was good to give Paul a rest for the night, and I'm pretty sure Boa Athu, who's our analyst man, will probably join us on the show on Tuesday night.
Yeah,
and of course yourself tomorrow night, Ashwin. You've got a show.
Yeah, tomorrow night I should be back and rolling with swinging from the hip. So join us then on 8 o'clock tomorrow night, and I think we've got a bit of controversy to talk about there too. So join us then to talk about whether there's a bit of sportsmanship that went amiss, and we'll talk about those sorts of issues as well as England and India and a few other games.
Awesome. But, sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good.
And everybody else, make sure you're tuning in to 7 o'clock in the morning for Paul's sports briefings. You got your soccer show with the Knicks, and Brad with his rugby league show as well. So make sure you stay tuned here at New Zealand Sport Radio to get all your sporting fixes now. And thanks very much for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you again very shortly.